Hi, welcome to What's That Origin, where we will be discussing the origin stories of characters or ideas from movies, shows, and books. And if you find yourself liking these videos, then please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share links to your social medias. Let's get started. Today we will be discussing What's That Origin with the Little Mermaid, Ariel. So in 1989, Disney came out with the film The Little Mermaid, and it started the Renaissance era for Disney, and it saved their company. This Little Mermaid saved a company that we would have never thought today would have been in financial troubles, but and we got a beautiful film out of it. Ariel even has her own color for her tail. They invented a whole new color for her tail. So, as a breakdown of the movie, The Little Mermaid, we have Ariel, this spunky, sometimes sassy redhead, who is extremely curious about human things, to the point where she grave robs sunken ships for human objects, because we want our Disney princesses to be grave robbers. But anyways, she's a very sweet girl. So she brings her objects that she finds to the surface, which is very taboo, for mer people at least. And she has this seagull friend who tells her what each human thing is, very wrongly. He thinks, a fork is a brush for your hair, or a pipe is an instrument that makes beautiful music. It doesn't, it just makes smoke or bubbles, depending on what you're doing. In the film, like I said, mermaids are taboo from going to the surface, and this is due to King Triton, her father's fear of humans, and as you see in like a prequel of Ariel's beginnings, you see it's because Ariel's mother dies at the hands of pirates. So Triton is very wary of humans, understandably so. Anyways, on one night, she is going to the surface because she doesn't listen, and she sees this ship. And she goes up to it, and she sees that there's this young prince on it who she becomes absolutely infatuated with, and almost stalkerish. But anyway, so she comes across this very young sailor who seems to be a capable enough sailor, but he's not a very good swimmer, as we see a couple of times in the film. And a storm happens, and the whole ship goes down. Everyone's saved except for Prince Eric, the man that she just became infatuated with. So she saves him, brings him ashore. He knows that some woman saved him, so he becomes almost a Cinderella experience where he's searching high and low for this girl who saved him. And Ariel gets to the point where she gets desperate to wanting to see this man again, to the point where she's manipulated to go see Ursula, who is trying to take revenge out on King Triton. She wants the whole kingdom of the ocean to herself. And so she manipulates Ariel into signing a contract stating that she has 3 days to have this prince fall in love with her, and she'll be given legs. If she does not, then Ariel will become part of her very disturbing garden in the middle of a very disturbing neighborhood of the ocean. And so Ariel agrees. She becomes a human, and she meets up again with Prince Eric. Oh, and she had to give up her voice as payment. So without being able to talk to Eric, she can't tell him, "You're looking for me." So instead she has to find other ways to make him fall in love with her, and it seems to be working. 3 days, who doesn't fall in love with people within 3 days? But when it comes time, Eric is starting to realize that he wants to marry Ariel, but then he's tricked by the sea witch with Ariel's stolen voice, and you know, like a siren call, he gets hypnotized. With like any other story you would hear about mermaids, you know, where sailors get hypnotized and they get drowned. This was really no exception. So at the wedding with Prince Eric and the Sea Witch, it's finally discovered that Ariel is the one who saved him, and Ursula turns back into Ursula, and the movie has Eric impaling Ursula with the bow of a ship. Goes right through her. And everyone's safe, Ursula's dead. When King Triton sees that his daughter really does love Eric, he gives in, he gives her legs to where she can live with him and marry him. And that's the end of the movie. But the origin story for Ariel, for who inspired Ariel, was not as, it's a beautiful story, but it's not as happy ending, depending on how you look at it, I suppose. So unlike the film The Little Mermaid, in the storybook of The Little Mermaid is a little short story by Hans Christian Andersen, who is from Denmark. It's not necessarily taboo for mermaids to go to the surface. It's actually sort of encourages a rite of passage, but you have to be of age, and the age is 15. So the Little Mermaid, who isn't really given a name in the stories, she's told all these wonderful tales from her older sisters, because she is still the youngest, just like in the movie The Little Mermaid. She is the youngest of all these sisters. There's all these stories about mermaids, her sisters going up to the surface, seeing all these humans, and this beautiful just world. So she's really excited, she's anticipating, and her grandmother, who seemed pretty influential to her, is telling her all these stories, and like she tries to say things that is relatable to the mermaids, like instead of calling birds bird, the mermaids wouldn't quite understand, so she calls them fish. There's fish in the sky. Yeah. The mermaids are told throughout their whole lives, I'm assuming, that they can live hundreds of years. So, you know, they have opportunities to live really good lives, but when they die, they turn into sea foam, and they don't have souls. And back when Hans Christian Andersen would have wrote this story, but been more religiously directed, and so mermaids don't have immortal souls. So when mermaids die, their souls don't go to heaven; they just cease to exist. The Little Mermaid is told this. You know, it's just what happens, and it's an acceptance. So in the story, when the Little Mermaid turns 15, she is giving what the story says is a crown of lilies made out of pearls, and a string of pearls that she can have on her tail. And this is to mark that she is officially allowed to go up to the surface. And the first night she does go to the surface, just like with Ariel, she sees this ship. And she goes up to it and she sees that there's this beautiful young man on it, who is the prince of the neighboring kingdom. And, you know, instantly she falls in love with this guy. And then there's a storm that happens, and the ship sinks. She saves him, and she leaves him in front of a temple or a church. And when he's coming to, he sort of sees her, he can hear her voice. And he sort of sees her, but she leaves before anyone can see her, because she knows that humans can be mean to mermaids, or, you know, try to capture her. And so she leaves him there, and it's a temple of all women, so a lot of nuns. And so she goes back to her life in the ocean. She doesn't say what happened to her sister. She starts becoming obsessed with this prince, to the point where she travels around and she hears stories about him, about his kindness and just how good of a person he is. And she becomes more and more in love with him, to the point where she's very depressed. And she goes to the Sea Witch in the story. And the biggest difference between the Sea Witch in the Little Mermaid movie and the Little Mermaid, the book, is that this Sea Witch does not have an an ulterior motive. She's actually not a bad guy, a villain. She explains to Little Mermaid exactly what the deal entails. So Little Mermaid, like I said, goes up to the Sea Witch and asks for legs. And the Sea Witch agrees and says that she has to give, the Little Mermaid has to give her her tongue to where she can't speak anymore. And obviously the Little Mermaid agrees, but the Sea Witch does go in to tell her, like I said, she tells her everything, that when her tail splits into legs, it's gonna feel like a knife, a sword splitting her tail, and every time she walks, it's gonna be like walking on knives for the rest of her life. She's going to be the most graceful female human. She'll dance beautifully, but every time she walks, it's gonna feel like knives in her feet. It's gonna be very painful. And it is also said that if the prince, she has all the time in the world to make the prince fall in love with her, and there's no time frame that she has. But if the prince were to love another and to marry another woman, then the following morning after the prince's wedding, the mermaid would turn into sea foam. So she's, right out of the gate, she's told, you know, what is going to happen if the prince chooses another woman. Mermaid accepts and goes up to the surface, takes the potion. Her tongue's cut out, she can't say anything. She takes the potion and she gets 2 legs, and the prince finds her. And he is disappointed that she is not the one that he's been looking for. But he takes pity on her. She can't walk, you know, she's got to learn everything. So the prince takes pity on her and kind of takes her in as if she were his own child. He doesn't really get any romantic feelings for her, and he just feels responsible for her. And so it gets to the point in the story where he's told that he has to meet with a princess in a neighboring kingdom because his parents are hoping that he might marry this woman, and then the 2 kingdoms will come together. So on a ship, when they're going to go and meet this other princess, he tells the Little Mermaid, you know, he would much rather marry the mermaid than this other woman, because he doesn't know who this other woman is. And he does really love the Little Mermaid in his own way, and of course the Little Mermaid thinks that he's falling more and more in love with her as in her, and kind of wondering why he hasn't asked her to marry, you know, him, and it wasn't really going to happen anyways. So anyway, so they go to this other kingdom, and the prince meets with the princess, who is one of the women who was at the temple who took care of him when the Little Mermaid dropped him off there. And immediately he thought that this was the woman who actually saved his life, when really it was the Little Mermaid. So he falls in love with this princess, declares that they're going to get married. Of course, the Little Mermaid's heart is broken. On the night of the wedding, of the prince and princess's wedding, the Little Mermaid is hanging out on the deck of the ship, and she's kind of just waiting for morning to break, because she knows that her fate is that she's going to not exist anymore. And then her sisters come up out of the surface, and all of their beautiful hair is cut off. They had gone to the Sea Witch to ask for a way for the Little Mermaid to be able to return back to the sea as a mermaid. And they are given a dagger in exchange for all of their beautiful hair. And the instructions are that the Little Mermaid has to stab the prince to death and have his blood drip onto her feet, and her feet would become a tail again. And so they waited for her to come back to them. When she goes to the cabin where the prince and princess are sleeping, she can't bring herself to kill the prince. She still loves the prince. So she accepts her fate, and she goes to the deck of the ship, and she casts herself, toddlers, she casts herself over the edge of the ship and into the water. But instead of drowning and becoming sea foam. She feels her body being turned into air, and she is lifted up into the sky where she meets the daughters of air. And they tell her that because of her love for the prince and, you know, not killing him, that she has made it possible to where she could earn an immortal soul and go to heaven. She has a probation of 300 years. However, this can be shortened if she hears the laughter of children, and she willingly accepts, obviously. And so, like I said, depending on how you look at it, it could be considered a happy ending because she gets an immortal soul, which is something the mermaids don't get. Or you can see it as a sad story where she dies for love. Either way. So one of a highly recommended movie that I really liked growing up, depending on how weird you were as a child. There's a 1976, I believe, film, The Little Mermaid, where the Little Mermaid has blonde hair. Her name is Marina, and instead of a fish named Flounder, she has a dolphin named Fritz, and it's a beautiful movie. I think my daughter's trying to open a window during a snowstorm. And it's one that I highly recommend because it goes a lot with the actual story. It follows it pretty closely. But yeah, so be sure to like, comment, subscribe, you know, share with your friends if you like this.